Hello and welcome back to the Halo series. My name is Nick Ingram, Director of Search Operations at Halo Consulting. And today we have Angela Buckley-Martin, former Director of HR at Sherpa CRM, a PE-backed tech startup that provides a customer relationship management sales solution for the senior living industry. Angela was also Director of People and the first people hire at Air Apps, an independent global mobile apps studio focused on iOS. Throughout our session, we will cover the role of HR in a startup tech environment, psychological safety in the workplace, and how to get buy-in from business leaders. But before we kick off the questions, let's get started with you, Angela. Could you share with our viewers where you started in your career, how you ended up in HR, and ultimately began working with startups?
Yes. Thank you so much, Nick, for having me here today. It's a pleasure to speak with you and everyone at Halo. My career path really started in business development in the hospitality and retail industries for many years. There was always a line of HR, or as I like to call it, people operations in that career path, whether it be hiring, talent acquisition, training, offboarding, payroll, compliance, all that kind of stuff. I was actually recruited by a client of mine to meet with the founders of Sherpa. She had said, "Hey, I just think you're going to be a really great fit. We'd love to talk to you." And I went in and met with the founders. I spent like 4 hours with them that day. And that's how I made my move over. A position was crafted for me. And I think one of the big takeaways was at the time I had also met with the president of the company who had said, and I was really sort of hesitant, like, "You're a tech startup. Why would you want somebody like me who does not have that tech traditional background?" And she had said, "Tech needs people like you. They need people operations, people focused people. For so long, they have focused on their product, and that's fantastic. But now there's a greater need to focus on the people." And so that's just kind of how I made the transition.
Oh, it's fantastic when roles are crafted for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Describe for us the level of maturity or lack thereof that you've seen at startups as the first HR hire, especially, and how did the HR function evolve over time?
Well, I'd say the most common lack of maturity was obviously policies, processes weren't well thought out or even created yet. So as an HR person, again, people ops, you're going in and you're realizing, oh, well, there's not a legally compliant PTO policy, or there's not a policy that's compliant for travel, or any of these things, or even onboarding processes hadn't been made. But actually, that's the fun part. You get in and you get to make your mark on it and develop these policies and processes. The bigger issue, I'd say, as far as lack of maturity in startups, is the people ops positions tend to be some of the last people hired. And they're usually hired, and I'm going to be pretty honest here, when either the marketing team is tired of doing job offers or the startup has gotten in a little bit of trouble with compliance. So I would challenge a startup to think ahead and maybe put some emphasis on having that people ops, that first person hired earlier in their development. But that's really kind of the common thread that I've seen.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. Um, what type of growth have you seen at your previous companies, and how did your own role have to change or evolve to facilitate that growth?
Sure. The startups that I've worked in have either doubled or tripled their growth volume within a year to year and a half. So high growth. How my role changed is, first off, I wasn't able to do everything all myself. So I had to hire a team. I had to develop the entire people ops team, to having people specifically focus on talent acquisition, to having people focus more on the compliance and payroll aspects instead of me sort of being the one-stop shop. We also had to change software. So what the HRIS software that we would have used when we had 10, 12, 15 people was certainly not going to be a viable option when we had 50, 75, and 100 people. Things like that. Using softwares to do global compensation strategy as opposed to just being able to do it on our own with research. So being able to delegate to team members, adapting and changing. I mean, that is the nature of a startup, is adapting and changing at all times. So that's really how going from the first hire to, in an organization that grows so fast, so quickly, how you have to really scale up the people ops team as well.
That's good insight. If, looking back, if there was one piece of advice that you wish you'd received prior to joining a startup, what would it be, especially from an HR perspective?
I think there'd be two things. The first thing is you have to be able to context switch. You are continually context switching in a startup. Um, you know, I I tell people this all the time. Not everybody can work in a startup. You have to be comfortable with being able to, I'm working on this project and then something comes through and I need to switch with this, or I need it here, or I need it there. Oh, all of a sudden we have to start moving in this direction. So you have to be very flexible and adaptable. And I think the second point of advice I would have liked to have had goes along with that context switching. We are really sort of satisfied when we can see a project from start to finish. We're like, oh, I'm done, finish it, put it away. That doesn't happen a lot in early stage startups because of the context switching. So being able to understand, what, I didn't get to finish that project because something else needed my energy and attention immediately, and not to be hard on yourself with that. So those would be the two pieces of advice I'd say.
That's a really hard balance to strike. Let's talk about your relationship with leaders. What did your leaders expect from the HR function, and how did those expectations differ from your priorities? And most importantly, how do you resolve those differences?
Um, can I say they expected everything? um, yeah, I mean, people ops tends to get lots of stuff lumped on them, especially in the early stages, from talent acquisition to compliance to payrolls to benefit management, to onboarding, offboarding, diversity and inclusion, learning and development, employee initiatives, even event planning. I've had to plan global, worldwide meetup events as the director of people. So there is a lot, handbook creation, policy development, um, owning the entire employee experience and candidate experience. How you balance that out is, first of all, there are some things that are non-negotiable, that are time sensitive, that you can't sort of, say, I'll get to it later. Payroll, benefits, compliance, hiring new people, onboarding. Those are things that you have to focus on. They're very time sensitive. Other things you sort of prioritize. Hopefully, you're able to delegate some of it. Some things you'll see a need maybe within your own team. You're like, we really have to get this foundation done, or it's going to affect other teams, or it's going to affect the organization. Building those foundation blocks is sort of how you would prioritize things, is my opinion.
You've talked about the HR function being layered in, perhaps later in a company's growth than maybe you would like. When not approached strategically, the HR or talent or people function can have a reputation of serving as a non-essential function, or maybe not positively impacting the bottom line,
Right.
for better or worse. What programs or processes get the most pushback, and how do you attain buy-in from executives for HR programs and processes in general?
So I'd say anything that doesn't have an immediate return on investment is what gets the initial pushback. I mean, at the end of the day, senior leadership is always looking for the ROI. And they're harder to buy in, especially when you're talking about policies or um, issues, or programs that you aren't very tangible in the beginning. So things like psychological safety. So I'm a big proponent of it. And being able to go to a senior leader, or an executive or a CEO, and say, hey, it's really important that we establish a culture of psychological safety. And they're kind of like, it's a little touchy feely. What is all that about? How is it going to help me? So I've worked with organizations that have truly, from top down, had a psychological safe environment, and the return on investment was incredible. We had 0% turnover in 2022. That is unheard of in a tech environment. We had continual employee net promoter scores of 100%. every quarter. Our referral rate, meaning employee referrals of, getting people in and referring, new hires, was incredibly massive. And because happiness is an attractive quality and people want to work where other people are happy. So being able to show that data to a CEO and saying, look, we haven't had to backfill positions because people are leaving. We are able to grow thoughtfully without worrying about other positions or people leaving. People are happy, people are safe, they're enjoying their work. So that will tend to get more buy-in when they can see that raw data.
Well, and good for you also to have the foresight of tracking some of those metrics and data to show leaders, hey, this is working or this needs to be fixed. Talking more about psychological safety, what practical, actionable steps can HR leaders at tech startups take to create a culture of psychological safety?
I'd say the first thing is figure out what is psychological safety. And this is a buzzword that people are throwing around. Educate yourself on the concept of psychological safety. Read some books. There's incredible books out there. For people who don't know, it's basically a term that means where people feel it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say I don't know something, or be your authentic self, or ask for help without feeling being a retribution afterwards. So Google, a little history, has something called the Aristotle Project, and I think it lasted around 2 years and over 180 teams, and they were studying what made the teams most successful. And the number one thing was psychological safety, that feeling of, hey, I can ask for help, I can say I don't know without retaliation. And so I would challenge people operation HR leaders. First of all, find out what it is, read about it, understand it. An organization needs buy-in from top down. It can't be on a siloed level. It needs to be completely the organization. I would say for HR leaders, lead by example, be vulnerable, lead with empathy, listen, really, really listen to people. I would also challenge HR leaders to hire people who are people centric. There's a lot of people, I mean, we don't want to talk about it, but there's a lot of people in HR that just want to do the task work and don't want to meet with people and talk to them. That's not a story. That's not a metric for success. So you need to hire people who aren't afraid to be people facing. And and people ops is not a one size fit all. It should be personalized to each organization. So those are just sort of the things I would say I would challenge people to do.
That's good advice. Wrapping up here and to shift gears, there is a lot of noise out there about remote work environments, but you worked at a remote company that had very low attrition. So,
Mm-hmm.
given your experience, what do companies with strong remote work cultures get right?
A few things. First of all, they trust their people. A lot of people, are going back to the offices. Some companies are adapting a hybrid model. I enjoy remote. I'm more successful in remote. I'm much more productive in a remote environment. So being able to trust your people that they're actually working, they're doing their work, treating people as if they're an adult. We all have things that come up in our lives, and to be able to say, hey, it's okay, go pick up your kids, or you've got something going on and you need to focus on that for an hour today, totally fine. So there's a high level of trust. I'd say the second thing is excellent documentation, being able to have things highly documented, so that when someone is offline, especially if you're working in multiple time zones, they know where to get their information. Um, and I would say, using the technologies that help foster remote environment, whether it be messaging systems. I mean, Slack is incredible, great video tools, and being able to be as efficient within those technologies, I would say, is what they're doing right.
Well, Angela, we so appreciate your time with us. Lastly, who should be reaching out to you and why? And what's the best way to get connected with you, especially for our viewers?
So I'd say the best way to get connected with me is on LinkedIn. You can search me under Angela Buckley-Martin. First of all, I'd say anyone that wants to have a deeper discussion about psychological safety and how they can bring it into their workplace. Anybody that's interested in understanding the psychology behind startups and in the HR function within psychology. So founders, early stage startup founders, or anyone in the HR field or people ops field.
Well, Angela, you provided some great content for us. We wish you the best of luck uh, in your career.
Thank you so much. It was lovely to be here.